We are Pro-Cannabis Media.
You're okay. Your child is seizing and they're convulsing and they're jumping off the bed.
She would hit all day. This would go on 12 hours.
Her lips turned blue and her eyes rolled back. She had her first seizure when she was 10 months.
Never in a million years did I ever think that this would be my life.
Oh my gosh. Hey. I mean, how do you just sit back and just accept my child's gonna die? No, you do something about it.
The destination is on your left. Arrived.
I thought this place would be like guarded.
It's nerve-wracking knowing that I have to go to Colorado to get the cannabis. I am breaking the law.
Wow. I've definitely never seen anything like this before.
What you're doing is illegal. A lot of people take the risk anyways. They don't want to be the cause of you getting your kid taken away by CPS. And they will take your kid. Don't tell your family members. Don't tell your nurse. Don't tell your doctor. Don't tell your family, nobody, your friends.
Protective custody warrant for the daughter, okay?
Grab our key, lock the door behind us.
All right, me and my wife are coming out, all right?
Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you guys?
Just gonna close the door?
No. Hey,
What is going on?
Relax. Hey.
Put your hands behind your back.
Why are you doing this?
Just the one daughter, who's named in the warrant, is going to be taken into protective custody.
I want to call the cops because people are about to take our daughter.
She's gonna freak out. She's in better hands with her parents who love her.
But the cops are taking our daughter. You might have to go somewhere for a little bit, okay? Look at me, okay? But Mommy and Daddy can't go, okay? I love you, okay? It's all right, baby. It's okay.
We're not smugglers, we're just moms getting medicine for kids who are really struggling. Until you've walked in someone's shoes, there's no room to judge.
We've lived in fear of our government since we started. A single cookie is a felony, 10 to life in prison.
I cannot just allow my child to just sit back and suffer. I'm trying to save my son.
We could possibly lose our kids to DHS. She wants to pretend that, that's not a possibility.
I definitely know it's a possibility, but I'm willing to take that risk to help him.
If he's going down, I'm going down with him.
The fact that the federal government is making us choose between breaking the law to help our child or watching them suffer is absurd.
Yeah, she's happy.
You're fixing your hair.
Say hi.
Look, you're waving.
Hi, everyone. Welcome again to another very special edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young, our regular weekly podcast where we find movers and shakers in the cannabis industry and bring their stories to you. Today, we are so fortunate to have someone who's a media veteran from the Philadelphia market and also the producer of that amazing trailer that you saw just minutes ago called Weediatrics. Her name is Erin O'Hearn. Erin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Jimmy, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Although I don't know if I love the word veteran attached to my name because it makes me sound old, but I'll take it.
Take it from one veteran, okay? I'll be the veteran. You're not a rookie, Erin. You're a pro.
That's right. I'm not a rookie.
Okay? Tell me a little bit about this documentary, how it came about, and also the name, Weediatrics. Where did that come from? Who came up with that?
Yeah, so Weediatrics is a play off the word pediatrics and then the word weed, which is, you could probably figure that out. And actually, the executive producer, Kimberly Earhart, came up with it. We went through several different titles when we were making this, and it truly was a labor of love because it took several years to produce and then to shoot and to write and to develop and get the clearance that we needed. But so Kimberly came up with it. She's one of those creative minds, and she's been a really successful producer for about over 20 years with various television programs. The reason that we decided to pursue the documentary really came from one of those situations where it was sort of an accident and we fell into it. I was actually working still at WPDI, the ABC station in Philadelphia, and I was interviewing a mother about a cookbook that she had written for her son, Leo, who was on the autism spectrum and more on the severe end. And he had a lot of gastroenterology issues because that often is associated with autism. And so she wrote an allergen-free cookbook. So I was interviewing her for that publication, and somehow, I don't quite remember, the conversation steered into medical marijuana and its use with children who are on the spectrum. So I had never heard of that. Obviously, I had heard of medical marijuana, but not used in that sense. So I started, my journalism skills started kicking in. I kept asking all these questions because I found it fascinating. And she told me that there was a network of parents out there who at the time were taking turns smuggling medical cannabis back to their children who needed it, because most states at that point did not have a sufficient medical marijuana program. So we started coming in contact with all these parents and really networking with them and befriending them and understanding their journey and the obstacles that they face every day. And Kimberly and John Earhart, who I worked for in Oakz Media and Open Water Studios, said we can do something with this. Like, this is a story. And it certainly was. And we ended up having a lot of stories that we included in the documentary. And so that's how we got started, and getting to know these families and understanding what this medicine has done for them has been a truly eye-opening experience for me, for Kimberly and John, for all the other producers and photographers who worked on the documentary, and certainly for other parents who've been looking for so long to find something that would relieve their children and their families of this pain.
It is amazing to me how many times I've heard the expression, cannabis has saved my life. Yeah. Cannabis has changed my life in the 2.5 years that we've been doing these podcasts and it's one of the reasons why I started Pro Cannabis Media, because I really felt no one was telling those stories, certainly not in traditional media.
Sure.
How much of a response, or how has your management and your news staff or your executive news staff, have they given you opportunities to tell these kinds of stories on your air?
So there have, I actually, it's funny that you said that, because during the making of this documentary, I took a small hiatus from reporting and anchoring, mostly because I was balancing 3 kids, a husband, the documentary, and something had to give. Right. So they have always been wonderful to me and have given me the time I needed to be a mom and to figure out that family life balance. So when I did take that hiatus, I don't know if they were quite clear on what I was working on, but I think they're clear now. And, they're just a supportive group of journalists and managers. The one interesting story that I was going to do when I returned to the station was a story about Erica Daniels, who was the mother I interviewed for the cookbook, and her journey not only to help her son, but the fact that now she has made a career out of not advocating for medical cannabis and its use in the autism world, and also designing her own line of what is called Hope, which is a tincture specifically designed for children who are on the spectrum. So they were pretty supportive of profiling her and doing that story. And then COVID hit and then everything got put on the shelf. So we're hoping to revisit it one day. But as you know, traditional media is a little more conservative. And when we had a little more flexibility with the documentary to get into the nitty gritty of all of this and really profile what we think is an enormous injustice in this country and what doctors have considered a medical crime.
Right. And it's, how many times have we seen these injustices, and cannabis plays a role, and you see it now in legislatures all over the country as they continue to make reform in their states and adding the social injustice as a motivator, as a factor to get these records expunged. It seems every day we see another news story about someone, usually a person of color, I might add, that gets stopped for some kind of a traffic violation of some kind that certainly I would never get stopped for. But the point is they do. And sure enough, they might have a cannabis pre-roll on them or any kind of a joint or something like that. Next thing you know, they get arrested, they're in jail, their lives have changed forever. This has to stop in this country. We continue to push towards reform on these shows, giving an opportunity and a forum to people to tell their stories. As someone who is a storyteller and as someone who has a background in media, I'm extremely frustrated that there are no public service announcements about the benefits of this plant for either pediatric care or our veterans who return who suffer from PTSD. So, when you say management is conservative, you're right. I get it. I've been there. But it is frustrating to me because they don't understand, as a media entity, they should be informing the public about the benefits of plant medicine. And I'm not just going to say cannabis only. And I don't think it's a cure for all things, but it certainly has powerful anecdotal evidence. So I guess my question is, do you see a time where we might see a change in traditional media where they might accept these kinds of public service announcements?
So in my opinion, I think that the change first has to come from the medical community. It's really not the media's response. Like, the media's we're the messengers, right? So if we don't have the information given to us from what is an established expert and from a source that people rely on or go to for their healthcare, then I don't really know how much of the media's responsibility it is to convince the medical community that they have to be more upfront or more open to this idea. So I would actually say that the change first has to start with the medical community and the willingness to accept research that isn't. We've put a lot of money into research, into marijuana research, but it has been, the majority of that money has been spent on the negative effects of marijuana, not the positive.
Looking for the negative effects.
Looking for this. So it's like a predetermined story. right? And that's where it has to stop. That we need to, learn, certainly have our medical community, our existing medical community, and our medical students learn more about the endocannabinoid system in the human body and the potential benefits it has on a variety of conditions. And, I focus a little bit on autism because we have a couple of children on the spectrum who are featured in the documentary, but we also have a child who has seizures.
Yep.
There's a child with an unknown condition. One of them is cerebral palsy, but a variety of neurological issues that have never been officially diagnosed that the marijuana could have potentially helped him, but they weren't able to get access. So I think that if we, as a country and as the federal government, take a really hard look at how this drug is classified as a Schedule 1 and work towards changing that. We're not saying I shouldn't say we, but I think advocates of making medical cannabis more widely accessible aren't saying it's going to be a free-for-all, with everybody smoking a joint, before they go to work. I think that everybody has to change the perspective that this isn't just a social lubricant, it is true medicine.
Right.
And that's where it has to start. So we have to get, the government to change the schedule, the medical community to be more open, and the pharmaceutical companies not to be hovering over everyone saying that they can do better with the synthetic version. Yeah. So and then I think that the public service announcements, the information will be more easily accessible for the media, less controversial, and much easier to distribute.
Yeah. And we're moving slowly in that direction. So, I think that time might come in my lifetime. By the way, never thought in a million years I'd be hosting a talk show about weed, right? It's just amazing to me. Unfortunately, my parents are both no longer with us, and I'm not quite sure I'd be doing this if my parents were alive, to be honest. But that being said, here I am talking about it and waving the flag as much as I possibly can. So I do want to go back to the job of the journalist and perhaps why a documentary, long form journalism, Erin.
Mm-hmm.
Every journalist loves the idea of, I don't have to get this done in a minute and a half. Right?
That's so true.
Right? So you actually have the time to tell the story. How much fun was that for you, or even a pleasure for you to do that?
Yeah, well, that's so true. Not having to fit everything in a minute and a half, it was not only a pleasure, but I think it gave the families a much larger platform to tell their story, because anything short of what we did would really be an injustice to their journey. They've lived an entire life of this, and 90 minutes seems like a very short time to tell their story. 90 minutes. So I can't imagine it trying to pack it into a minute and a half or 2 minutes. But it was a wonderful experience because we felt as though we were right there with the families, and we really were able to gain not only a better understanding, but a much deeper empathy for what they go through, and the resilience and their determination. It is incredible to see. It's inspiring. And the biggest takeaway from producing this film was seeing the desperation and the struggle and the grief that comes along with having a child who is struggling or who is sick, and knowing that there may be a possible antidote for it, but you've got CPS and the government saying, no, we make up the rules here, and you're not allowed to have that little bit of hope. Because that's what it comes down to. It's not even really a movie about cannabis. It's a movie about hope, and it's a movie about doing anything for your child to save them and to give them the best quality of life possible. So who is anyone to take that away from them?
Right.
So that's really what the long form did for me. It just gives you a deeper understanding.
Right. And isn't it amazing? One of the first things that the naysayers, the prohibitionists, always bring up is, What about the kids? We've got to keep
Right.
these dispensaries a certain amount of space away from schools. And I'm like, as an educator, it freaks me out because I keep telling these people, actually, that's the exact opposite thing that should happen. The parents' responsibility, and you see the dedication in your film, I'm sure, of the parents to the child to do the right thing for the child, right?
Sure.
It's a medicine. So my point is always about education. There's a reason why in Europe that alcoholism is a lot lower in Europe than it is in the United States. It's because in the United States, we put that one over 21. And of course, we protect and we put parameters and we tell our kids, no, you can't do this, rather than, if you do this, here's what's going to happen. Here are the consequences. And it's why it is an adult product. And the same, and I always tell parents this now, I say, Luke, you've got a great opportunity here, because this way you control the education to your child about these adult use products and also adult use activities. So we're talking about sex, drugs, and rock and roll to your kids. And now you have an opportunity to do it. Embrace it is what I tell parents all the time. Learn about it. Okay. So, where did the parents in your story, and I apologize that I have not had a chance to watch
That's
it,
okay.
but we are looking forward to, and I've seen these stories 100 times. The Weed the People documentary that featured Mara Gordon is fantastic. It changed my life when I watched it, and I expect people who would see your film will feel that same way. In California, cannabis has always been accepted as a medicine since the mid-90s. But in Pennsylvania, that's not so true. What kind of stigma did the parents come up against? And I'm sure that that's part of this story for you too.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny that you mentioned California versus Pennsylvania, because while California may be one of the more progressive states in the country as far as medicinal marijuana and recreational marijuana, one of the families featured in the film that family was from California, resided in California, and they had their little girl, their 7-year-old, taken away in the middle of the night by CPS because they chose to give her CBD oil to treat her seizures, as opposed to a traditional pharmaceutical drug that was causing all sorts of horrible side effects. And someone who we can't really confirm who, we don't know whether it was a school principal, a school nurse, a neighbor, a doctor, decided that they were going to call the authorities because the little girl, they found out, was no longer on the anti-seizure medication. She was doing much better with the CBD oil. So they were charged with medical neglect, which really is a form of child abuse. And she was gone with authorities and placed in foster care for 4 days. And it was all because of their choice to use CBD oil, which has, in the right form, has been proven to help tremendously to prevent seizures.
Yeah.
But that I think that the differentiation is fine. It's a medicine, but it shouldn't be used as the first line of defense. And that needs to change too. It shouldn't be a last resort. It should be a first option. So yes, there still is a stigma even in California.
Right.
And that also had to do, I believe, heavily with that had some racial undertones as well, is why that family was targeted. But Pennsylvania, the stigma, Pennsylvania actually, even though most of the state is fairly conservative, the medical marijuana program here is one of the more progressive in the country. So the list of qualifications for your medical marijuana card in Pennsylvania is quite extensive as compared to some other states in the country. But there is still a stigma because everybody thinks you're giving your kid a street drug.
Right.
And that's just not true.
No, and it hasn't been true for 80 years. And yet the government keeps saying that. And it's interesting you bring up seizures, because the one big pharma drug that is out there is Epidiolex, which is, I believe, $45,000 to get access to a prescription. And it's controlled because the government says, oh no, this is an alternative. You can use this. You can have a prescription for this. in Massachusetts, I don't know if you know this, but they have finally taken the word marijuana out of the medical association and have replaced it with cannabis, because that is
which
the
they
name
should.
of the,
Yes.
right, and of course they should. And now we're starting to hear actual medical schools introducing cannabis as a form of study and as a true medicine. And there are so many pop-up curriculums and universities and online opportunities to learn about cannabis. And of course, we preach education all the time and all of other shows that we do and all the interviews that I do too. So I do think we are making some progress in the medical community. It's so sad that in Massachusetts, the one cannabis pediatric guy, the guy who actually could prescribe to children, just retired, Dr. Eric Ruby, and he's been interviewed a few times by us, and he's a joy, and he would still work with parents if they reach out to him, even though he's a retired physician. I think those type of doctors are finally coming around. There's an integrative medicine MD, Dr. Mary Clifton, actually out of New York, is going to be joining us with a doctor-to-doctor discussion for one of our regular shows on Pro Cannabis Media. So we're excited about that. Where's the future for this? You know, where do you think, is it going to stay with the states, or do you think the federal government, specifically the Democrats, who now are in charge of the White House at least, and have went to the ballot box preaching decriminalization?
Sure.
Needless to say, they've been a little busy with what else is going on, all these emergencies everywhere in this country right now. Do you see the day, though, perhaps in the next few years, where we will see it either descheduled off and allowed at least the states to dictate what they want to do with this plant?
So yes, I do. I think that day is soon. I really do believe that, because I think that one of the decriminalization and the social injustice part of this is really important. I think it's hard for me to say it's just as important as making sure that children and anyone else who's sick has access to this. But I think it's a motivator for people, because now you're doing two things. You're going back and fixing something that was wrong, people who were wronged in the past. And you're also ensuring that the future is protected and given the right medication, the right treatment, the same equalities. So there's two things going on there with that. And, the other part of that is, in order for us to really understand the best ways to use cannabis, is research. And it's a collective research. It can't go on individually in states, because that makes no sense. That's not how science works. Science builds on top of information that previous research has provided them. So without descheduling it, or at least changing the schedule on the federal level, none of that research can really be optimized the way places like Israel are conducting research. And, on top of that, we should be collaborating with other countries. It's not just about what's going on. Israel is so far ahead of us as far as the research they've done for cannabis. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. If we would just change the schedule and collaborate, because we're a much bigger country and we have many more resources and much more money. And so the collaboration is an important piece of this, but it really can't happen without the federal government changing something. So I am confident that it's going to change. Sometimes what frustrates me is something that happened a few weeks ago. There was a New York Times headline, and it was about a new study that the National Institute of Drug Addiction funded.
Yep.
And the headline was 11% of teenagers who use marijuana for a year report becoming dependent, among other substances. Well, the among other substances is a pretty important part, because the other substances were opioids, tobacco, and alcohol, all of which that are far more dangerous, not only from long-term use, but from experimentation. And the number of people who have died directly or indirectly from tobacco and alcohol and opioids is skyrocketed and continues to increase, where there has been no documentation of anyone ever dying from a marijuana overdose. So that kind of headline, the fact that marijuana was plucked out of that study as the drug worthy of a headline, is really frustrating.
But that's what they have access to the research money. There's been over 30,000 studies of cannabis by the substance abuse community looking for the negatives in this plant. And by the way, they're relying on the cannabis grown at the University of Mississippi that has between 7 and 15%, 7 and 10%, I believe, THC, the intoxicating chemical in the plant. So it's really not even studying the same plant that's being used medicinally in legal states like Massachusetts, soon to be New York and New Jersey. So it is something
it's cherry picking is what it is.
Right. And as a media person, you know the dangers of headlines.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. That's what my point was, is that why am I looking at this? Like, shouldn't the headline be, or really the research and the headline, shouldn't it be the country needs an answer to the opioid crisis, and we need to rethink how we treat pain?
Right.
Not these useless studies on the percentage of people who become addicted, because we know anything is addictive. Caffeine's addictive.
Right. It's the most addictive. It's the most addictive drug in our society. Right. 91% people drink a cup of coffee every day.
Yeah. So I think that priorities are in the wrong place. And I think it's predetermining. It's really creating studies and funding studies that support a narrative that is outdated and has motivations other than what the
overwhelming anecdotal evidence, right?
Yeah.
Right. Needs the research to support the anecdotal evidence that you found out for yourself, for sure. And again, countless stories. It's incredible.
Sure. I mean, the documentary has countless stories that we didn't even get. I mean, there's other families that are featured briefly in the documentary that we didn't have time to go into all of it. And it's a shame. I really hope to be able to give those other families a platform beyond Weediatrics. But I think that, the more people who watch this film, and just, it's available on Apple TV and Google Play and Amazon, so it's easy to access. But the more people who watch it, I think that your mind's going to be changed if you're on the fence. It's going to reinforce what the community who are of advocates for medicinal cannabis already know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's going to bring it to a more emotional level for them, because you actually see the suffering. But we need people and we need lawmakers to see this film and understand that they're not regulating a drug, they're prohibiting families from getting something that they need. So if you reverse your thinking that way, and stop focusing on the drug and start focusing on the families, or I should say the plant, and start focusing on the families, then all of a sudden your thinking changes, and so does your perspective.
And I'm still fearful. I know a lot of people that are cannabis advocates. They're still fearful that the federal government will make the wrong decision at that level and offer the opportunity to big pharma to develop. And that's scary to those that are in the industry right now, because there is an opportunity for the mom and pop, for the entrepreneur to get into this industry in some capacity and take advantage of the plant medicine that has been documented as an effective use on a number of disorders, like you guys already have in Pennsylvania. Are you fearful of big pharma getting involved and screwing this whole thing up? That's an opinion.
I'm fearful of a lot of people getting involved in this thing and screwing it up. It's not just big pharma, but I don't. Here's the thing: pharmaceutical companies. There's coming from a family where we've seen a lot of different ailments in my family, whether it be cancer, different kinds of cancer. There's a place for everything, right? It's just, but you can't have it all. And just like you said in the beginning of the show, medical cannabis isn't for everyone. It doesn't cure everything. well, pharmaceutical companies can't cure everyone either. And so the idea of just putting a Band-Aid on your ailment, whatever it may be, is antiquated as well. Like there's a shift in how pharmaceutical companies need to think beyond cannabis, just about treating the whole person and getting into preventative care as opposed to reactive care, because frankly, the insurance companies can't afford it anymore either. I mean, we're that unhealthy of a society and a culture. So I think my fear is just, that there's more time goes by and these families sit there and wait for a lifeline, and no one is paying attention. And if they are, they're paying attention because of their own benefit, which is, whether it's from a financial gain, a political gain, I don't know. There's everybody's out for themselves these days. So, right.
They're
so
all they all see a buck. They all see
right?
Yeah.
And I, as far as the economics of this, I mean, so medical cannabis is one of the industries that actually did okay as, during this pandemic, right?
It was deemed essential. It was deemed essential by most governors, except for Massachusetts. Just saying.
So we could take that up with Massachusetts. So I think that when we're talking about the social injustice piece of this and how much, the Black and Brown and Latino community suffered all these years under these laws, it would only make sense that the government in its journey to, change the schedule or to make sure that this is a thriving part of the economy, as is tobacco and alcohol and really opioid sales, that there is business opportunity for people from all different backgrounds and of all different colors, because to repeat the cycle only so a bunch of white middle-aged men can control the money generating from this is really silly.
That's right. I think white middle-aged men have screwed up our country pretty good over the last few decades, but my own opinion, sorry to throw my gender and my race under the bus, but I'm taking responsibility and I apologize. I really do. I did misspeak. I want to make sure I'm clear here. People understand that I do know in my home state of Massachusetts, medicinal cannabis was deemed essential and allowed to continue. It was the adult use recreation stores that the governor shut down. And again, showing a little ignorance there, because even those who go to the adult use recreational stores that are out there, they understand that it has positive medicinal effects on their lives. They just haven't taken the time to get diagnosed or go to a doctor and get their medical card. And I want to make sure I clarify that, because,
Yes. Yeah, I appreciate that.
You understand that. And we appreciate you. And by the way, we're so excited. We will be adding it to our Roku channel, which is PCM TV. It's a streaming channel. I'll be talking to the production group about doing that. And we're looking forward to that as well, because that's why I formed this network of like-minded content producers, is to share the stories that are out there. And you, as a storyteller professional, I'm sure did an amazing job. And I look forward to watching it. And thank you so much for joining us and talking to us about this project.
Thanks for having me.
That's what it's all about.
But make sure you download it too.
I will be downloading it. I will be watching it, and I will be looking forward to it. And more importantly, those other stories of the families that perhaps didn't make the final cut, as they say in the biz. If you have some stuff and you want to put together a story or a profile, I will air anything you produce, Erin. How's that?
Okay. I appreciate that. Well, their story needs to be told, so we'll have a conversation about that.
Fair enough. Thank you so much. That's Erin O'Hearn. She's out of the Philadelphia market. The film is called Weediatrics. Check it out. In the meantime, we all thank you for watching and listening to another edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Cooperation.
stopped by the airport police.
You're okay. Your child is seizing and they're convulsing and they're jumping off the bed.
She would hit all day. This would go on 12 hours.
Her lips turned blue and her eyes rolled back. She had her first seizure when she was 10 months.
Never in a million years did I ever think that this would be my life.
Oh my gosh. Hey. I mean, how do you just sit back and just accept my child's gonna die? No, you do something about it.
The destination is on your left. Arrived.
I thought this place would be like guarded.
It's nerve-wracking knowing that I have to go to Colorado to get the cannabis. I am breaking the law.
Wow. I've definitely never seen anything like this before.
What you're doing is illegal. A lot of people take the risk anyways. They don't want to be the cause of you getting your kid taken away by CPS. And they will take your kid. Don't tell your family members. Don't tell your nurse. Don't tell your doctor. Don't tell your family, nobody, your friends.
Protective custody warrant for their daughter, okay?
Grab our key, lock the door behind us.
All right, me and my wife are coming out, all right?
Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you guys?
Just gonna close the door?
No. Hey,
What
relax.
is going on?
Relax. Hey.
Put your hands behind your
Why are you doing this?
Just the one daughter, who's named in the warrant, is going to be taken into protective custody.
I want to call the cops because people are about to take our daughter.
She's gonna freak out. She's in better hands with her parents who love her.
But the cops are taking our daughter. You might have to go somewhere for a little bit, okay? Look at me, okay? But mommy and daddy can't go, okay? I love you, okay? It's all right, baby. It's okay.
We're not smugglers, we're just moms getting medicine for kids who are really struggling. Until you've walked in someone's shoes, there's no room to judge.
We've lived in fear of our government since we started. A single cookie is a felony. 10 to life in prison.
I cannot just allow my child to just sit back and suffer. I'm trying to save my son.
We could possibly lose our kids to DHS. She wants to pretend that, that's not a possibility.
I definitely know it's a possibility, but I'm willing to take that risk to help him.
If he's going down, I'm going down with him.
The fact that the federal government is making us choose between breaking the law to help our child or watching them suffer is absurd.
Yeah, she's happy.
You're fixing your hair.
Uh-huh.
Say hi.
Look, you're waving.
Hi, Jimmy Young here, and I have to ask you, are you secure? If you're in the cannabis industry, you have to have security for your grow facility or dispensary. And we are so happy to welcome Salient Systems to our group of supporters. You get to call their rep. His name is Ben Shower at SalientSys.com. So don't even wait an hour. Call Ben Shower at 413-333-7974. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are Two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first. Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.